Hi, it's Ryan from Robot Dog Studio. People have been asking for this for a long time. It's a full, real-time walkthrough of a mix from one of my live band recordings. Let's check out a preview of the track and then we'll get right into it. So I pull up the file and I don't even really check out the tracks. I recorded this myself, so I know what I'm getting, I know what I'm working with. But for the sake of this video, just gonna kind of cut out everything we don't need here. All right, there's the song, and I'm gonna get rid of tracks we don't need. Okay, great. Now I'm going to save a new version. And like I said, I know what I'm working with. Not even going to listen. I'm just going to start throwing my presets onto it. First thing I do is to put a preset right on the output bus. Just apply my usual mixer panel configuration first. Was probably different because I recorded it on my laptop, which kind of has a different configuration, just everything stripped down just for recording. So now that I'm mixing, back to this layout. I go right ahead and throw my master bus preset on. User channel strip settings, mix master, output full. Now this might look crazy, might look like a lot, but each of these plugins are just doing a little bit. They're only doing a little bit. And as long as I hit these meters at the right level, it's not gonna overcompress everything. It's gonna be just right. The other thing I wanna mention is I'm going to be using mostly third-party plugins, but that's only because I bought all these years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I'm still using the same ones and I'm just very used to them and I work quickly with them. And it's really hard for me to just kind of throw them out. But I will throw them out when I can no longer upgrade, when I'm stuck, when I have to buy a subscription or something. I will totally just go to the stock Logic plugins because I think they're great. I think they have everything you need. I'm just so used to using these third-party ones. I work fastest like this. But I have done mixes where I switched over to totally stock plugins because I wanted to see if I could do it. I knew someday I'm gonna have to get rid of more and more of these third-party plugins because I don't want to upgrade them. I don't want to get on subscription plans. They're not necessary. The Logic plugins are great. They really do the same exact thing, and someday I will be moving over to them and that's going to be just fine. But for now, I work fast with these third-party plugins, so I'm going to use them, but don't think you have to buy all these plugins to get a mix like this. It's completely not necessary, and I wish I never bought all these plugins, but I bought them back in the day when I was learning, So anyway, I'll just go through what is in this plugin chain really quickly. There's this bus plugin that applies a little saturation and also has these great meters that I can look at to make sure I'm hitting this whole plugin chain at the right level. Then there's this guy, which monos out all the frequencies below a certain point. 110 hertz is good. Then just a real subtle mud cut EQ, and this can be adjusted once I get into the mix. This plugin looks crazy, but it's just doing a little bit of compression, kind of the transparent compression. And this is the Slate bus compressors. These are also doing just a subtle amount of compression, like 1.5 dB on each of these. They're just very straight up presets that have just been used in rock music, since the 80s and 90s. But these compressors do have a little more character. I definitely find that they do add a nice high-end sheen to the mix, and they sound good, so I stuck with them. Then there is some multi-band compression. Again, it's like a set and forget thing. They're just not too heavy-handed. It's just gonna keep everything in line. It's just gonna make everything faster and easier for me as I do this mix. After that, I have two pretty obscure plugins. They're just combining to basically act like a Pultec EQ. This boosts the highs and this one cuts the highs and kind of has the same effect as like a Pultec high shelf and high cut. Speaking of Pultecs, here is Waves Pultec, which is actually just set to do nothing, and I have it deactivated as default, but if I need like just a little bit more color, I can turn it on. And you also notice the output gain is set to minus 0.5 dB, so hopefully when I turn it on, it doesn't like raise or lower the level of the signal. It just adds a little bit of color. I'm gonna leave that off for now. I turn it on when the mix is a little dull and it needs a little something extra. Then after that is limiter, FabFilter Pro L. I think the previous version to what's available now, it works fine, and I don't feel the need to upgrade at this point in time. And then the Logic multimeter, so I can keep an eye on my, my RMS levels and LUFS levels. Oh, and there's an EQ. The EQ is not doing anything. I just really like the spectrum analyzer that's built into FabFilter Pro Q. So sometimes I'll flip that on to visually look at the frequencies in the mix. After that is a pretty cool free plugin that just tracks how long you've been working on a mix. That's always interesting to see how long it took you to get to a certain point in the mix, or even to like check yourself, like I should be taking a break. And these are down and dirty mixes, so if I'm doing well, I'm really getting the basic mix in 20-25 minutes. Here I've been talking for 10 minutes. It's been edited a little bit, but that's why it says 10 minutes right now. Anyway, so why am I putting this huge plugin chain on my master bus before I've even mixed anything? Well, that's a good question. This is what's known as top-down mixing, and it's just the way I do it. It's not something you should be afraid of if you want to try it. I mean, certain people are locked into these rules where they never put any master bus processing on, or, who knows? I'm not like that. These are down and dirty mixes. I got to finish the mix, get to the next mix. So I want to get things going as quickly as possible. So I apply this processing to the whole mix. It basically sweetens all the tracks that you put through it, and it tightens them up. And you just have to do less processing on each of those tracks as you're putting the mix together. It's really effective. I always do it. I've been doing it this way for 10, 15 years now. It's really works for me, and it's worth a try if you've never done it before. Top-down mixing. You start a mix with all this processing on, and like I said, give it a try. I like it. Anyway, moving on, we've got this just a very, very simple set of tracks here. We got kick, snare, overhead, bass guitar, two guitars, but they're the same guitarist. He had like two combos set up in a stereo configuration, so I mic'd them separately, and that's really effective in this case because there's only one guitarist. I can pan those hard left and right and create a stereo effect even though there's only one guitarist. Really like that setup. And then there's one lead vocal. It says Vox Dry there because he had a pedal that had some built-in processing. Turned out the processing really wasn't doing much. I just threw out the wet track, so I'm working with this main vocal track. Let's call it Vox because there's no dry or wet version. Anyway, yeah, we're just gonna do a little bit of bussing here. We're gonna take the kick, snare, and overhead. We're gonna send these to bus 1. We're gonna go to that bus that they're now bus 2, and we're going to pull up another preset. User channel strip settings, bus, drum bus. Okay, now it names it drum bus. I'm gonna create track and set that up in the arrange window. Okay, we got our kick, snare, and overhead coming through this drum bus, and the drum bus has some processing on, and all it is another one of these bus plugins, an EQ if I need it. There's nothing on that EQ right now. And then there's a Soundtoys effect rack, which is really key. We're going to get to that later, but there are 2 different layers of distortion there that are going to be applied to the whole drum bus, and I'll show you that later. And then there is another Slate bus compressor, and this is just like basically the SSL bus compressor on the usual SSL drum bus settings. And I have this mix knob right here set to about 38%, and since there is a mix knob on this plugin, this is effectively parallel compression on the drum bus without having to do any different routing or anything. I just love when things are just so streamlined like this. There's parallel compression on the drums. It's like 100% parallel compression. It's no different than if you duped all your drum tracks or set up some kind of send configuration, just using the mix knob. So we've got built-in parallel compression on our drum bus. All right, so again with the presets, we haven't even listened to anything, we haven't even mixed anything. Just because I mix so many songs like this that, you know, this just gets me up and running, get some basic processing on everything quickly, and just allows me to be more creative through the rest of the process. So we're going to go right to the kick track, and we're going to pull up the kick preset. Now we get into the way I do these presets in general for each track is none of the plugins are active when I pull up the preset, which is great because I can go through and listen and really configure each of these plugins properly for the actual track that was recorded. I think that's the way to do it when you're, working with presets like this. If you apply the exact same settings to all different source material, its results may definitely vary. So I think pulling them up like this, deactivated, is a great way to do it. Let's just go right to we'll just get all our presets on. We'll go to snare here, and then overhead mono, and let's go crazy and just go to bass guitar, and we're gonna get our bass guitar set up. And actually with these electric guitars, since they're basically going to work as one, they're already panned hard left and right. You can see, I guess, from when I was recording it like that. Let's set up another bus for that guitar. So we'll just call that electric guitar, new track, and looks like that. That's also great because you can then control the level of that guitar on one fader. And we're going to go right into instruments, electric guitar, and then on the vocals we're going to go to lead vox. All right, so let's save it because that was an annoying little bunch of work, even though it's pretty straightforward. Don't want it to crash and lose that, so save it. Here is where we get into really the trick of doing these live mixes. The singer is right in the same room as the drums, like probably 6 or 8 feet from the drums, maybe. So there's really no way around it. You've kind of got to start the whole mix by mixing the vocal first, because you want to get the vocal sound you want, even though there's going to be all this drum bleed in the background of it, because you're kind of stuck with that. You want the sound you want out of your vocal, and you are stuck with those drums in the background. You can try to gate it, you can try to cut it up, you can do a lot of different things, but in the end, a lot of that just comes out wacky. I think the best thing to do is just roll with the bleed in the background of the vocal track. And, a lot of times it makes a great room sound for the vocal when you're hearing the effects of the vocals come through that drum bleed. Anyway, I think that's the way we got to do it. So just find a passage of the vocals and loop that while we start mixing on the vocals. We are officially starting this mix, and we are definitely starting with the vocal. So let's solo the vocal. And yeah, I'm sorry, we haven't even listened to the song. I'm just diving right into it. I hate in mixing tutorials how everything is always, they're just soloing parts, and I'm like, what is even going on with this song? Because I really don't believe in mixing everything in solo. You kind of have to hear how it all comes together. But I record these sessions in such the same way that they just all end up being processed really similar. And so I've just got it down to a science. So I just dive in and I do it, and I do this basic processing on each of the tracks, and then I listen to the mix as a whole. And balance my levels a bit. That's another thing I always thought was so weird, because a lot of people think, oh, we're gonna do a faders up mix. It's just such a weird thing to me, because you can't just open up a song. You can't just open up something you mixed and do a faders up mix, in my opinion, because everything changes so much as you process it, and everything needs like a little bit of basic processing, like, you know, a kick and a snare. Once you EQ and compress them, you know, properly compared to a raw track, they're just going to sound completely different and have a completely different energy, and you know, a completely, you know, it's just going to be so different than when you do that faders up mix. I mean, maybe that was the thing when people would do a lot of processing on the way in, when they would record things much the way they were going to sound in the finished product, then you could do that faders up mix. But as far as this is, everything is raw, you know, recorded right in on a cheap audio interface, so it's gonna sound nothing like it should if I just start the mix with a faders up mix. I need to start processing these tracks a little bit before I can see how they really sit together. You know, I will probably just, you know, post a clip of the finished mix just so you know what you're getting into, but for now I'm just gonna dive right in. We're gonna listen to the vocal.
It's not the way it's got to be. Ooh.
Okay, there it is. Let's get into the processing. First off is a gain plugin, and that's set up to automatically invert the phase. That's more of getting everything in phase with each other, because they're all recorded in the same room. You want to make sure all the tracks are in phase with each other, so they're all supporting each other as much as possible, not canceling out frequencies. So that's there. We can use that later. First is this Satson channel. It's a console channel saturation plugin, and I have it set up so you crank up the gain and it doesn't actually make the track louder. It's output compensated right here. It just adds more grit, more harmonics, more subtle distortion to the track. And I put that first, kind of just, you know, I'm just emulating mixing through a console, and that would be the input gain on the console. So we'll throw that on and we'll turn it up.
It's not the way it's got to be.
All right, you hear it gets a little woolly, probably too woolly, so just back that off a little bit.
It's not the way it's got to be.
That's kind of the default setting, and that's fine for now. And then there's some EQ. Let's forget about that for now. I think we're just going to throw on the compression. So there's two layers of compression, more characterful compression, and I put that first in this case because if I was recording through some outboard gear and stuff, I would run, you know, the vocal through a compressor, you know, an 1176, something like this probably. So we hit that first. And let's see what level it's coming in at.
It's not the way it's got to be.
That looks pretty cool to me. Like, rule of thumb, and you know, just go for 3 dB of gain reduction on these things. It's just totally on vocal preset here. We're on the blue version. That's, you know, supposedly better harmonics for things like vocals. Black is more for drums. But anyway, also turn the analog noise off here by default. Anyway, yeah, that's coming in at a good level. You know, just know it's probably gonna work fine.
It's not the way it's got to be.
Then after that, there's a more transparent compressor. And this one, I go even a little harder. I mean, this doesn't have to be an exact science. We just want a nice, clear, loud, fat vocal for this mix. So probably gonna hit this one pretty hard, but it's only on a, you know, 2.5 ratio, so it's not crazy. It's, you know, it's not gonna cut it down too much.
It's not the way it's got to be. Ooh.
So that's cool. Boost the makeup gain a bit.
It's not the way it's got to be. Ooh.
Okay, yeah, and I can hear that vocal is pretty muddy. It's just from experience, I know just kind of EQ these SM58s in the same way. And this EQ preset, I should probably update it a little bit, but I just totally customize this to everyone, so it's just fine the way it is like this.
It's not the way it's got to be.
Actually, that's already a lot better, but usually there's some muddiness around here. We'll just find it.
It's not the way it's got to be. Ooh.
So yeah, you just boost find the muddy point and boost it and then cut it out.
It's not the way it's got to be. Ooh.
That's fine. Cut a little bit more of the lows because we're getting a little bit of a breathy pop in there. And then this high cut, I mentioned it before, but like a lot of pop mixers, they're always like, the first thing to do is put like a high shelf on, and that's really not my experience of what I do in these rock mixes. Especially this one, the vocal is right in the room, same room as the drums. Yeah, so we're definitely doing some high cut to maybe just cut a little of the cymbals out of the background.
It's not the way it's got to be.
And to be honest, the cymbals aren't super loud in the background of this mix. The drummer is not a crazy hard hitter, so this one is easy in that sense. But anyway, yeah, that's the basic EQ. There, I have this Pro MB multiband that's ready to go if I want to use it. That's another way of kind of selectively cutting out that muddiness in the vocal, but I don't know, not gonna mess with it right now on this mix. Also, there's a de-esser ready to go, but again, it's down and dirty thing, not really too worried about those subtleties. Anyway, here's a gain plugin to kind of step into our, time-based processing on, the effects, the gravy, the sauce on the vocals here. First one is just like a slapback delay on the vocal here. It's ready to go.
It's not the way it's got to be. Ooh.
The default one I have ready to go is like a pretty subtle one, but I remember recording this band years ago, and they had like an effects processor that they used on their own vocals, like in their pedal board, and it was like really heavy with delay and reverb, and I think that's gonna work cool for this band. So I think I'm gonna get like a little more colorful delay going for them. Presets, vocal effects. I think one of these, Dirt Echo or Dirty Slap, are pretty cool for this type of thing. Let's listen to Dirt Echo.
It's not the way it's got to be.
Yeah, that's really cool. What was the Dirty Slap like?
It's not the way.
I like the Dirt Echo, but we're gonna adjust it a little bit.
It's not the way it's got to be.
Let's turn the MIDI tempo off because we're gonna do a tap tempo. Let's listen to the beat of the song here. All right, I think it's sounding pretty cool. The feedback. Let's turn the feedback down a little bit. We don't want like an infinite delay behind the vocal here. And then we'll turn the mix down a bit.
So it's not the way it's got to be.
And also, I did the tap tempo and everything, but I'm not really feeling an eighth note delay. I'm not really feeling a timed, to the beat of the song delay. I think we're gonna switch over to time and make it something more like 250. That's like a long delay, but shouldn't really be in sync with the song.
It's not the way it's got to be.
All right, let's make it even shorter, just so it is, you know, you're not hearing the bounce of the delay. It's just kind of thickening up the vocal.
It's not the way it's got to be. It's not the way it's got to be.
All right, and I have reverb ready to go, and also another layer of delay if I had wanted it. And I have this Altiverb on here, but lately I've just been using Valhalla plate for a basic plate reverb. Anyway, that's there if I want it, but for now, we're not gonna go straight to the reverb. We got a basic vocal sound, and yeah, there's some drums in the back of the vocals, but
it's not the way
it's not bad at all compared to some really, you know, rockin' songs that I've mixed like this that were recorded in one room. On this one, you could almost get away with just mixing the drums first because there isn't a ton of that bleed in the background. But I just wanted to show you the basic concept of how you should mix the vocal first. It's a really key technique to doing these live in one room mixes. I think now we can go to the drums. Let's just check out what the drums sound like, just the drum bus by itself. I think that is a good place to listen to it when the hi-hat is open, because that's going to be probably the most obnoxious sounding part of the drums. We're seeing the opposite effect of the usual, which is there's all this lead vocal bleed in the in the drum track, so that's a little different than usual, but you know, that's the fun of these live in one room recordings and mixes, just, you know, always dealing with stuff like that. But anyway, there's the drum bus with just the drum bus processing. No, we haven't processed the kick, snare, and overhead, the individual tracks yet. You know, sounds pretty weird. Doesn't sound great. You know, I think kick and snare, they generally need so much processing that I just dive in and start mixing on them. So let's listen to the kick, and I'm gonna listen to it in solo. That's fine. I stuck a mic inside the kick drum, so we're hopefully have a pretty isolated sound. Dial in the sound we want out of the kick and then move on. So let's hear the kick. All right, so I remember when I mixed this for the first time, I remember thinking, oh yeah, that kick drum sounds really bad. And it's funny because I made a video where I just threw the mic inside the kick drum with no stand or anything, and I had just done that on a recording session the time before, and it sounded amazing. But this time I did it, and well, it sounds like this. You know, not good, as there's not a lot to work with there. And the level is a little low too. It's a little quiet. But anyway, we're gonna work with it. Let's check it out. So one of the first things I have there is a gain plugin. In this case, we're gonna turn the phase invert off, and we're gonna give it a little bit more juice here. Try 4 dB. That looks good. That'll give us a little bit more meat to work with. Still super muddy, still not ideal. Next up is a gate plugin. We're probably gonna use that, but I'm gonna hold off for the minute because we need to whip this kick into shape. It's gotta sound like something, so gonna work on that first. Let's hit the compression like I did before. I hit the compression first and then EQ it, just because the compression does so much to these tracks that are recorded raw, like straight into an interface. Let's hit the compression first. Again, like to go for like 3 dB gain reduction. So I'm gonna actually boost this. I mean, you can hit it here, but I'm just gonna boost this gain plugin that's before the compressor. go crazy. Alright, so at least we got a little more to hear what we're working with. After that, another compressor, just a little bit of transparent compression. Alright, so super boomy. There's a lot of vocals in the background of it. Oh yeah, and let's get this guy on there too. Alright, so now we have a lot of meat to work with. Let's carve this thing up. It needs a lot of help. It's very boomy, there's no definition. Let's start with like a low shelf that's set to cut. Alright, let's try to cut the huge amount of mud here. Alright, that's something. And then try to get some definition in there. And maybe high cut to get rid of some of this bleed. And like a little bell here to poke through. Alright, it's something. It doesn't sound great, but let's hope it works in the mix and, you know, gets a kick drum into the mix. I also have this transient modulator ready to go. It's kind of overdoing it right now, but I think we'll probably want that in the mix. Okay, so now maybe we can get into using the gate. Really what I use the gate for on the kick drum is to subdue that constant boominess that's going in the background. It kind of makes a more defined thing instead of boo, boo. It could, you know, be more like boo, boo. Anyway, let's try the gate on here. And I start the gate out with the range cranked all the way up, so it's going to be cutting it completely off. And even before that, let's listen to this. Listen to the side chain range here. That's what frequency, between what and what frequencies are going to trigger the gate. That's fine. Let's hear how the gate is working with it cranked all the way up like it is. That's working fine. It's kind of popping a little bit as it comes in. Let's turn the look ahead up a little bit. All right, that looks like it's functioning properly, but obviously we're not gonna have it that extreme. Okay, so now we're gonna back that range knob down. Okay, so it's not doing anything there. We're gonna, within reason, cut out some of that boominess with this range knob. All right, we will try that. We got to move on. You know, we got to hear how that sounds in the mix before we go too crazy with it. All right, so checking out the snare. Like I said, it's good to work on the snare in a part where there's an open hi-hat because that's going to be your biggest problem in the snare track. So it's good to have it in there and not be surprised when you mix your perfect snare sound and then you come to the part of the song where there's an open hi-hat and it just all falls apart because all you're hearing is open hi-hat and the snare mic. So let's check it out. Again, working quickly, we're just gonna throw some of the Satsyn on, and it's cranked up by default. That's probably gonna be good. Get the compressors on. Pretty good there. Give it a little more gain. Get the other compressor on. And the snare too sounds pretty crazy. It's pretty ringy and kind of, it is what it is. It's an indie rock sounding snare drum. EQ on the snare. Let's put this at about 65. High pass filter there. That's usually my go-to range for snare. Get rid of this for now, and then I usually put a pretty dramatic boost here down around like 100 hertz or so. Let's hear it. 150, 160. It's kind of, I used to do that with an API EQ, outboard EQ, and it's, just really transforms the sound of an SM57 on a snare drum, makes it fat. So I'm just doing that, going crazy with this this first boost here on the snare. And then at the same time, that's really accentuating that ringiness. So let's find the ringy frequency and let's at least bring it down a little bit. There it is. That's pretty solid. Let's, get some crack to the snare here. And then, of course, it's the balancing act of how much of that open hi-hat bleed are you going to bring in by EQing the highs on the snare. Let's, that's where this high cut, this low pass comes into play. Let's adjust that a bit. That's fine. And then, it's another transient modulator. We'll just throw that on. It's doing a lot, but that's fine. I like a really punchy snare in the mix. Then let's hear the kick and snare together. Maybe even a little too pointy for now. Let's back it off a bit. Alright, that's fine for now. Let's hear the overhead. Okay, this overhead is really hot. I think overhead should be a bit lower on the input level, so I think we're going to back that down a bit. It's pretty harsh on the hi-hat there, but still I like to just juice it up a bit anyway. And then, we'll cut out those high highs. I feel like there isn't much place for frequencies way up here in these kind of rock mixes, these classic rock kind of mixes. Tone that down a bit. And then I do like to throw that transparent compressor on this overhead because, I don't know, I just like to control it a lot more. Otherwise it's like you're really gonna have things popping and poking out of that overhead track. So let's just bring it into control a little bit more, compress it pretty heavily. All right, that sounds good. Let's hear the drums. All right, and I think the kick is probably going to be too loud, but we can start hearing things in the context of a mix now that we have some basic processing on the drums.
It's not the way it's got to be.
All right, not bad. It's gonna come together here. Let's just get our processing on the rest of the tracks. This is basically how I do it. I get the processing on the tracks, and then I can get to that faders up mix that we were talking about, because things have been shaped a bit. They've been whipped into shape. They've been sculpted a bit. They maybe sound like they would have sounded if they were properly recorded into a console with some EQ and compression already, or we had time to like really work with the tones and, you know, dial in the tuning and teching on the drums and everything. So let's go right to the bass guitar. We'll hear that. Again, a little quiet for me, so put some gain on it. Okay, that'll be good. Use this Satson, of course. You can go heavier on this with some tracks than others, and let's compress it a bunch. I mean, just like this, you know, bed of low end underneath the song. So let's compress it pretty heavily. Again, with my rule of thumb, you know, 3 dB, that's looking pretty good. We have the colorful compression. Now we have the transparent compression to just really glue it together. You know, I like to use a lot of compression on things. These mixes aren't subtle. It's a, you know, 3-piece rock band. Great. Where it's coming in on the preset is just fine. And then this is really the magic bullet for bass guitar, especially bass guitar on these tracks that are going to be on videos that people watch on their iPhones, on their, you know, on their mobile phones. You want to put a little grit, a little distortion, a little bit of like a grindy sound to the bass, so it cuts through and you can hear it on those tiny speakers. So that's what this Saturn is for. It's just got this one EQ band here that just really, that's like, I mean, over exaggerated, but that's the band, and that's what makes it cut through on these little speakers. So listen to it in the context of the full mix, and then adjust that band until it's just a little rude on your monitor speakers. When you can hear it really a little too much on your monitor speakers, then you know you'll be able to hear it just right on a tiny phone speaker. Anyway, we're not there yet because the levels are not balanced between all the instruments. We're going to do just a little bit more processing. We're going to listen to the guitars. Now, the guitars, we have those 2 guitar tracks, 2 different amps, and we're going to see how well they balance with each other. Here they are. Let's hear it from the beginning. All right, cool. Good tone there. I can tell one is just a little louder than the other, so we're going to balance the 2 out. Alright, that's pretty balanced left to right. Let's hear those just on their own, just because I'm curious. They're blending really well, but maybe there's something weird on one or the other. Alright, really nice. Here's the other. Alright, this one on the right, it's a little darker. It's not the greatest sound. But they come together. And, you know, they sound really good together. So I'm not going to mess with it. Let's listen to that, and we'll start throwing some processing on it. Guitars, I mean, they don't need a ton of processing. They're already, you know, distorted. They're gritty sounding, but, you know, let's just get a little bit more edge on it. That's good. I compress guitars far less, distorted guitars, especially because they're already compressed by their nature. So, but I do, you know, in these live recordings, things go up and down. There's a lot of dynamics. Let's just tame them a little bit. Just like to tap it just a little bit like that. I'll just keep it all like a little more on the level. And guitars sound pretty good, but you know, they could use a little EQ. A little bit of mud down there. And let's bring in some clarity on the guitars. Yeah, that sounds good. And guitar is not a bad idea to use this Pro MB to like really subtly, you know, cut a little mud selectively. All right, now I think we have some basic processing on all the tracks, so we can now do that faders up mix. We can, you know, we haven't done any automation yet. We haven't even really mixed, we haven't even listened to the mix all come together. So let's find a part in the song where all the instruments are coming together pretty loud. The transition between the verse and chorus, that sounds good. Alright, so it all sounds crazy. It's I don't know, it's muddy, just like everything's competing with each other. Let's get the balance right. Start with the drums, bring in the other instruments. Turn the bass down a little bit. Bring the guitars in. Alright, we're getting our faders up mix here. It's starting to sound a little bit more like a song. Let's bring everything in, vocals and everything. Let's listen to it from the top. Alright, so the vocals are cutting through really nice. They're above the instruments in a nice way. Oftentimes in these mixes, at this point, I am selecting all the instruments and lowering them in level. But I think we need to go to the loudest part of the song, make sure we're just not, you know, slamming our master bus too loud on this song. Now we're going to bring up this meter that's on our master bus. Alright, so now we're going to bring up this meter that's on our master bus, and we'll see if we're just completely overloading it. Yeah, it's hot. It's like a little hotter than it should be, and we could just use this gain plugin that's on the master bus, but since we haven't applied any automation yet, we can just grab all of our tracks here and just turn the faders down. I know from experience that you just want these meters to kind of tap 0, and that's like going to be a good level to hit all the rest of this master bus processing. I don't even look at how it hits this final limiter. It could be hitting like 6 or 8 decibels of gain reduction, and that's okay. If it sounds good, it sounds good. And it is, but that's fine. I mean, I think the rule of thumb here is to go for between -4 and -6, but I think it's sounding fine where it's at. All right, so yeah, now that's our basic kind of, you know, gain staging, really. Let's listen to a little bit more of the mix, see what we want to do from here. All right, I like the low end of the song, but I think it is a little muddy. I think it's a little boomy down there. So let's try to listen and hear where that might be coming from. Let's take the bass guitar out, see if the boominess is like all coming from the drums or the kick drum. A lot of it is, I think, definitely. Because we muted the bass guitar and it's still a little muddy. So just to make these mixes go quicker here, you know, maybe if I was really dialing it in, I would continue to EQ the kick drum, but let's just EQ the drum bus as a whole right now. Hit this EQ that's on the drum bus. I think we'll really be able to pull it together here. Find the muddy frequency. About there, I'd say. Maybe narrow the Q, then we'll cut it out. That's a lot tighter. Maybe we'll throw a little low end back in now that it's kind of, we've cleared up some of the mud. Nice. Drums are sounding nice, and while we're here, maybe we'll brighten them up a little bit, add some sparkle. Yeah, that's not going to hurt anything. One thing I sometimes like to do, or often do like to do, is throw an R bass on the kick drum, and that really brings in some lows, some real sub frequencies that often just aren't really present when you capture the drum with a mic, and that can really bring a more professional quality to the sound of the drums. In this case, it's very like indie rock kind of drum tones that are going on. I'm not really and also the kick drum is already pretty muddy as it is, so boomy. So I'm not really inclined to use that R bass, but the R bass plugin really does add a nice dimension to a lot of kick sounds. Let's hear what it does. All right, yeah, you can probably hear that if you have a subwoofer, but I think we're gonna leave it off for this mix. Yeah, I don't like it. It's getting too muddy. We'll leave it off. All right, save again. I think we're getting really close on this mix. Let's throw the bass guitar back in. All right, there's a little bit of mud. Let's put this EQ on the bass. Clean it up a little bit. And then also, yeah, let's go back and readdress that band on the Saturn. All right, cool. Now, I still do feel like there is some muddiness in the mix, so rather than tweaking those things individually, let's go to this one EQ that's on the whole mix, and we'll just tweak this. All right, I want the guitars to come through a little bit more now that we've brightened up the drums. Don't be afraid to go pretty heavy-handed on EQs, you know? Just make it sound good. And maybe we'll do a low pass on the bass guitar just so it's not too stringy sounding. All right, cool. That's a basic mix on this track, and I think it's ready to go. So I remembered we never added any reverb to the vocals. It just has that one delay plugin on it that's, got a lot of character to it. I think that's all it needs. We didn't add any reverb to the electric guitar. We didn't add any reverb to the drums. There's enough ambience going on. Not always necessary. I think, I may have forgotten to add reverb to the drums, but I don't think it really needed it. When a mix is working, it's just working, and it's a beautiful thing, and I think it's time to step away. Call it done. If you want to make it even better, come back and work on it later. But when a mix is working, enjoy it. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, hit that like button on this video, subscribe to my channel, and if you really want to do me a solid, check out some of the products I offer. I have the best drum sample plugin you can buy right now, as well as an IR pack, TCI files, and there'll be more stuff coming soon for sure. So anyway, keep having fun recording and mixing, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.